Give me liberty and give me Annette.
Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where I talk about the Constitution, politics, history, the culture, pretty much anything else I want to talk about.
It's your podcast. You can do what you want.
This podcast can be found on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, I don't know, a few other places. You can find it. Just go look for it. So today I am joined by D.K. Williams.
Hello, Annette. Glad to be here again.
It's good to see you. So you contacted me recently and you said, oh, you're going to write an article.
Yes.
On Richard Jewell.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, the movie obviously was the inspiration for it because I like to take some pop culture stuff like movies that apply to real life. And since this movie is based on an actual thing, I thought it was a great learning opportunity for everyone.
Right. And just, I want to establish, first of all, try not to move the table anymore.
Oh, okay, you got it. Oh, yeah.
For those of you that are just listening, I'm filming all of my episodes now, so you can find this video of us on YouTube if you want to see what we look like while we're...
Or Annette. You want to see what Annette looks like. Yes.
While we're podcasting, just for fun. So we just got back from seeing the movie.
Yes.
And first of all, for those of you that are thinking about going to see it, I don't usually see ours, so I should just tell you right ahead of time, right at the start. Lots of language. It's a Clint Eastwood movie, so it's kind of expected. There wasn't any gratuitous violence. There was a bomb, obviously.
Right.
So, but that was not. It wasn't overly violent at all.
Right.
There were no sex scenes, nudity, or anything like that. It was just lots of F-bombs and things. So I can't really recommend it for that reason. But it was very well done, and
I agree.
Yes. So I cried. So it must have been pretty good.
And I guess we should give because we're going to discuss the entire movie.
Yes.
So it's a spoiler warning if you haven't seen it. Although to me, it's almost like, it's a historical event that happened in 96. So is it really spoilery? But just, at the end of Titanic, I won't tell you what happens. It's kind of the same thing, right? So,
right.
So we will be discussing all of it. If you don't want to know, if you want to go in completely cold, we'll be talking about it. So.
Right. And we come at this from a different perspective than just your average moviegoer. Right? We're both attorneys.
Yeah, but don't hold that against us.
Yes. Well, if you really don't like attorneys, maybe go see the movie because I think you'll come out at the end liking them a little bit more.
For one, anyway. Right.
So, you have your own podcast?
I do. Yeah, check this out. It's called The Law with D.K. Williams. Google that, The Law with D.K. Williams. Follow me on Twitter, and whenever something new comes out, I pretty much will tweet about it, and you can go from there. And the Twitter account is The Law DKW. And please check that out. It's also a Facebook page, The Law with D.K. Williams. I've talked about a lot of famous Supreme Court cases that I think are important that have kind of shaped the country, shaped where we are today. And then I will also talk about some of the new ones that come out, like last term, new cases came out, talk about those and how they will change the way we do things in the country. And the new term is now going on. They're hearing arguments. And probably in a couple of months, they'll start putting out new cases, and we'll talk about those as well.
Yeah, They always have new great cases that we need to be paying attention to.
Exactly.
So it's good to have some place to go where someone can tell us what the heck it means. And
or at least what I think it means. I encourage people to read these cases because that's one of the things that got me started on this is whenever I do the podcast, I will link to the actual case. Because I've seen people on TV and radio, talk radio, wherever, and they're adamant about a case. And it's clear from their discussion of it that they haven't read it. And that's just embarrassing for them. Yeah, so don't be that guy.
Yeah, I see. I don't like reading the cases. Ever since law school, I'm like, I really don't want...
They're not scintillating.
They're not.
It's not as good as a Stephen King book or Larry McMurtry, who, did you notice that was what the lawyer was reading at his desk?
Oh,
he had a Larry McMurtry book of The Lonesome Dove, which, I'm just Lonesome Dove. I noticed that because I had that same copy. It's very popular. And that's a great book. If you haven't read Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, thumbs up.
And so we're talking about the Richard Jewell movie where the lawyer was reading the book.
Right. Yes. Because part of the thing was at the beginning he wasn't all that busy.
Right. Yeah. His assistant or whatever
who
she was, love interest. Oh, I just gave it away a little bit. Was like, you're not that busy.
Right.
Talk to Richard. Yeah. So anyway, the few things that stood out to me, well, even just remembering who Richard Jewell was.
Yep.
The things that stick with me from law school when this case comes up is, number one, the one thing that I took away that I'll never forget from law school is they said, don't ever talk to the cops.
Yes.
Don't ever. Just call your lawyer and don't talk.
Right.
The other thing is res res ipsa loquitur, which
has no application to the Richard Jewell movie.
not at all. And it's a totally nerdy thing that only law students and lawyers would get. So.
Yeah, and it rarely is really an issue in real life either, but it's something you have to learn, I guess.
So where do you want to start with this?
Well, start with the context of it, the historical context. The Summer Olympics were in Atlanta in 1996, and that's when a bomb did go off in Centennial Park, which was, just a big public area, and they were having concerts outside. So lots of people were there as part of the Olympic celebration, and that's where a bomb was placed. And Richard Jewell was a security guard there. He wanted to be a law enforcement officer, and that's part of his character. I mean, the real life guy. I mean, he wanted to be a police officer. And he gave undue deference to the police because he thought he was helping them, and he thought they were like his buddies when they are never your buddies. You know, when they're talking to you, and at one point there, the law enforcement officers, the FBI, played by John Hamm, says, hey, this is the only way we can exonerate you, or this will help us exonerate you.
Right. They acted like they were there to help him.
And they are not. They never are.
They're not.
No. If you say something that might lead to you being proven, or might be exculpatory, that's the legal word for it, that doesn't help you because you're innocent until you're proven guilty. You don't need exculpatory evidence. But if you say something that might be twisted around some way to be used against you, that's what will happen.
Right.
So you start innocent. Nothing you say can make you more innocent. It will perhaps give them something to use against you, which it certainly did here in Richard Jewell's case, because he's like offering to help them search his apartment, his mom's apartment. He lived with his mom. And he was just, as the lawyer, played by Sam Rockwell, actual lawyer was Watson Bennett, I believe is his name. Watson was his first name. I remember that. Yeah, Watson Bryant. And he's like, I think you should quit being so solicitous. Which
he was very. He had a lot of deference towards law enforcement of all kind because that's what he wanted to be. He was also a simple guy.
Yeah. Yes.
I kept thinking during the movie, what is it about him? You know, is he a little bit slow? And I came out with he was really simple and overly trusting.
Right.
And it was like the perfect storm because he was overly trusting and he wanted to be in law enforcement.
Right.
So he trusted them because they were who he wanted to be.
Right.
And he related to them.
And a couple of times when he's being interrogated or they're questioning him, he says, I'm law enforcement like you.
Right.
And they are kind of like laughing under their breath, right?
Yeah, and even the guys he worked with.
Yeah, Richard, yes, you are.
Right. In security, the security guys, the cops that were working with him at the park, he was kind of like laughing stock.
Right.
Nobody took him seriously.
Right. He was a little gung-ho in his duties.
Right.
And it does not portray him as a saint by any means either. He was just a guy. And it started off where he met the lawyer. He was working for a government agency as a supply clerk, which I had no idea. I assume that part's true. Then he got a job as security somewhere. And eventually he was working for a sheriff's department in Metro Atlanta, I guess, not far from Atlanta. And he was fired from there. And apparently the sheriff, the acting sheriff, or somebody in personnel suggested he get some psychological counseling.
Right. So that became part of his background.
Right.
And that would later
be used
come back
against
to haunt him.
Yeah. Right.
And then he worked for that university.
Yep. He was like a university police officer or just security. I wasn't quite sure.
It was hard to say because it said cop on a
uniform.
Right.
But that might have just been his hat. Or it said police. I mean, it wouldn't say cop, I don't think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But we got the impression that he was actually some sort of an officer, not just security.
Right. Because universities will have their own private police force. Right. I mean, they will have that. They'll have campus police, which are actually police officers.
Right. They have jurisdiction over the university.
Right.
But not outside.
Right. So he had that job. And one thing that ties into that, when he is leaving the Small Business Administration office in Atlanta, and the lawyer he knows has been nice to him, who turns out to be or eventually becomes his lawyer in the criminal investigation, Richard Jewell's telling him he's leaving because he got a job and he wants to become a law enforcement officer. And Sam Rockwell, the actor, tells him, don't become, I won't use a curse word, don't become a jerk, right?
Right.
And he's like, oh no, I would never do that. And then we cut to him as the police officer, the campus police officer, and that's what he's become.
Yeah, he's basically violating students' rights.
Yeah.
bursting into their dorm room without their permission,
Right.
manhandling them.
Right.
So yeah, he's
Because he thinks they're drinking in there, or they were drinking in
Right.
there, but because of their alcohol on campus, and he's acting all like he's doing the Lord's work and instituting law and order because these rogue college students are drinking beer in their dorm room, and he does become a little too self-important.
yeah,
A trait sometimes,
and it gets him in trouble.
with police. Yes, he gets fired because there were multiple complaints about him
Right.
doing things like that. Yep. So he got fired from that job, and but then he was still able to get a security job for the Olympics because
Right.
they had to hire all kinds of security. It's a massive undertaking, right? And that's why he was at Centennial Park when he found the bomb.
Right.
I mean, I guess he alerted them to a suspicious package, and the bomb people came and find out it was a bomb.
And he helped a lot of people
Yeah,
get
he-
out of the
absolutely.
way. He was a hero. He went in and was insistent that everyone move back from this bomb.
Right.
And if he hadn't done that, a lot more people would have been killed. I'm
Because
sure.
2 people died, and over 100 were injured.
Right.
The bomb was set up. It was 3 pipe bombs with nails all packed around it. So that was, for maximum shrapnel damage, which is what I imagine how most of the other 100 people got hurt.
Right.
But they did start getting people away from where the package was. And if they had not done that, no doubt a lot more people would have died.
Right. And so he started out as being known as a hero.
Right.
He was on CNN. He was, CNN, of course, is based in Atlanta. So I think that's part of why this storm, this perfect storm that almost convicted him, started there in Atlanta because they were so gung ho on. This is our story.
Right.
These are our Olympics. This is our town. So he started out as a hero that found the bomb,
Right.
and
And he was very humble about it. He was just like, I was just doing my job. A whole bunch of other people helped move people away from the package, which turned out to be a bomb. So he was very humble about it at that point. And he was humble about finding it and saving those people throughout the whole movie. He was just like, I was just doing my job. So that was good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he learned some humility, I think,
He
along
did.
the way.
And
Yeah.
he was a simple guy, and then
Yeah, he was not a rocket scientist. But
all of a sudden,
most people aren't.
No. But all of a sudden, things changed
Right.
because it looked to me it was because the FBI did not have any other suspects. I mean, that's the impression, is like they found someone and decided he fits a profile.
Right. And as John Hamm, who plays one of the main FBI characters, says that it is basic law enforcement. Whoever found the body, you have to check to see if they did it, right?
Right.
And he says whoever finds the bomb, you have to look into them to see if they planted it there. And Richard found the bomb, and so that was the first thing that clicked into some of these FBI's heads. And then they started doing the profiling.
Right.
He's a disaffected white guy who wanted to become a law enforcement officer, was looking for attention, and as the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporter said, and we'll talk about her also, he was a fat guy. That's not how she said it, but a fat guy living with his mother, and so all of that played into him being a suspect. But they never had any real evidence against him.
Right. It was just a profile. He fit a profile.
Right.
And instead of what should have happened at that point was, it's fine to profile because you got to start somewhere, but they should have gone and found some actual hard evidence. Did he belong to a militia?
Right.
He didn't.
Right.
Was there any physical proof? There wasn't.
Right.
But instead, they leaked it to the newspaper.
Right. Yeah.
And so
the John Hamm character leaked it to Kathy Scruggs, who was the actual reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who did write the story, or broke the story, along with another guy who helped her write it. They mentioned all that in the movie.
And she was portrayed as just will do anything to get the story.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that was true. That there was an article written by someone for the paper.
Yeah, there were several articles about her depiction. And the Atlanta Journal-Constitution itself issued a letter to Clint Eastwood and the movie production company saying that, or demanding a disclaimer that it wasn't, the portrayal of Kathy Scruggs in the paper itself was not, it was a fictional depiction. It wasn't actual. That's what they demanded.
Right.
And the real controversy is, and I think it will distract some from the movie because I don't think it really added anything to the movie.
No.
But the movie intimates that the Kathy Scruggs, the reporter, traded sex for information from the FBI.
Right.
Right.
But which really didn't matter. That really
It didn't.
That wasn't germane.
Right.
What was more germane to me was that she just came across as
Oh yeah, she was an aggressive person
very aggressive
and not real
and not really concerned with the facts.
Right.
Just wanted to get that story first and get it out there.
Well, but in her defense, and she says this briefly at one point, she says, I reported the facts that Richard Jewell was a target of the FBI. That was a fact.
Right.
She never said he did it. She just wrote that he wasn't under investigation. And then it just took on.
But of course, from that point. And I think that's why part of the problem was that it was in Atlanta where CNN was.
And she worked for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Right.
And she said, we have to be the leader on this story or why are we here?
Right. It was like ground zero for news.
Right.
And so he just happened to be the guy that got targeted. And the problem is that all the media, of course, picked it up and ran with it. You still see the problem today with media.
Yes. They're like locusts.
Yeah,
They just swarmed on his apartment, and he lived with his mother. They swarmed on that apartment, and they're just camped out there. Anybody comes and goes, they're shoving microphones in their face.
Yeah.
And I think that does still happen.
Which is the problem is because I know a lot of us are naive, and we think that journalism should be about finding the truth. And
Right.
But it's not.
Right.
And obviously in this story, it wasn't either. It was just finding the biggest story as quickly as possible and putting it out there with as few facts behind it as possible because they wanted the story. They wanted to run with it quickly.
Yes, but they
had
did
this
have
big
that,
character.
Yeah. I mean, they got another source to say that he was under investigation.
Right.
And remember, that's all the paper said.
Yeah.
He was under investigation. But then, it gets twisted into, hero is suspect. Maybe he, all this stuff about maybe he did it,
Right.
and all this conjecture, and he gets treated as if maybe he did it.
Right. And if he hadn't been the hero before, he
Right.
wouldn't have gotten all that attention. But
Right.
because he had been first characterized as a hero.
Yeah, there's like 2 or 3 days where it was nothing but him. People say, he found it, he saved lives. And then the story leaked that the FBI was investigating him, and then it just switched 180 degrees on him.
Right.
No.
And that's why it became such a big deal for him.
Right.
If he had not been Richard Jewell who found the bomb, it wouldn't have been. I mean, they would have published who the guy was, who the suspect was, but then it would have,
Yeah, but he wouldn't have been a suspect because part of the reason he was a suspect was because he found the bomb. Right. Which apparently does happen. I mean, and they talk of some instances about people that do create a problem, discover it so they can get attention.
Right.
I mean, that
Yeah,
does
it is a
happen.
thing. It does happen.
Right. But usually you will need more than just that, which they never got. And they never charged him. Not in real life. They never charged him. They just continued the investigation, and it was 88 days because they put that up in the movie before the FBI said that he was no longer a target of the investigation. But that's 3 months where he had to live as people considering him a murderer, a terrorist.
Right. And all he got in the end was a piece of paper from the FBI saying you're not a target anymore. I felt so bad.
Well, I am sure that his lawyer made sure that it went around to all the news stations. But but he made the point, the lawyer was, so I assume you're going to have a press conference to announce this like you guys did before. Mm-hmm. Although they didn't really have a press conference before to announce that he was a suspect. It leaked. But there were press conferences about it. Right. And of course, whenever that happens, whenever something bad is put out in the paper, that gets all the headlines and all the attention. And then if 3 months later they find out that it's wrong, if it gets mentioned at all, it's on page 12.
Right, or a little tiny retraction in one paragraph that nobody ever sees. Right. And it seems like the biggest problem is that, like you mentioned, we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
But when the press picks it up and says that you're a suspect and splashes you all over the papers, you're convicted in the minds of whoever's reading this.
And
so he was trying to prove that he was innocent instead of the government trying to prove he was guilty, which is what they're supposed to be doing. But
and it's, and it made a good point about, the media is not bound by any of these rules of evidence.
Right.
The media people that read the media can believe whatever they want to believe, but he was never close to being convicted because he was never even charged. They never had enough evidence to even do that. But that's how he was treated for a while. And part of, we're talking about that, how people think that if you're charged with something, you must have done something wrong. Because at one point, the reporter says to his lawyer, if he's innocent, why is the FBI here? As if because the law enforcement is looking at you, you must have done something.
Right.
And that is an offensive notion.
It is.
It is an offensive
There
notion.
were a lot of offensive things that happened in this case, from what the movie portrayed anyway. Right at the beginning, the first contact that the FBI had with them, with Richard.
When they lied to him.
Yeah.
Yep.
The story had leaked, but Richard didn't know it.
Right.
And so the FBI came over to his house and said, hey, come help us make a training video on finding bombs.
Right.
Right. So right off the bat, they're lying to him, which we know is legal for law
Police
enforcement
can
to
lie
do.
to you all day long,
Yes.
but if you lie to law enforcement, that's obstruction of justice. Ask Martha Stewart about that.
Yeah. So right off the bat, they're lying to him, and they bring him in under false pretenses to the FBI. And so the message that I take from that is it's not just don't talk to the cops when you're under arrest, because he was never arrested.
He was not under arrest.
So don't talk to the cops at all.
Right? Absolutely.
About anything unless you have a lawyer there, because he went in good faith. And what were they? They were filming him, and at some point they tried to get him to sign away his Miranda rights on film to look authentic.
Right.
For this
they were telling him, this
video.
isn't real. This is just for our training video. So sign this Miranda warning. But he was smart enough not to do that.
Yeah,
And that's when he
thank
contacted
goodness.
his lawyer for the first time.
Right.
Right. But yeah, just keep that in mind. Police can lie to you all the time. It is a accepted investigatory practice to do that.
Although I'm pretty sure that if he had signed that,
It wouldn't have held
it would
up.
not have held up, because
No.
that was totally under false
Right,
pretenses. Oh,
right.
you're just acting
Right,
right now. This
right.
is not real.
It
You haven't
shouldn't
really
have.
signed your rights away.
It shouldn't have, but then if the FBI agents are going like, no, we did it right, who are they going to believe? The 3 FBI agents or Richard Jewell, the suspect who's probably killed a bunch, set up a bomb in the park, right?
Because they had it on film. They were smart enough that they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, and then when he refused to sign it, they said, all right, we're going to do this again. They left, came back in, and he took out that tape and threw it away. I mean, it was just in a garbage can. They could have gotten it. But the implication is, no, this is something that we don't want anybody to see as part of our investigation, and you put in a new tape and start it over, which I have no doubt that happens.
Yeah.
And I know I'll always hear from people that are like, oh, you hate the police, try being a cop, all this stuff, all these people that are very, very defensive about law enforcement, and I get that. But there's nothing more American, nothing more patriotic than asserting your rights protected under the United States Constitution. That's why it's there.
Right.
So don't ever let anybody give you a hard time for enforcing your rights, because that's what America is about. Don't fall for any nonsense to the contrary. Nothing more American than asserting your rights.
Yeah.
So do it. Even when you don't have to, especially when you don't have to. It's like muscles. If you don't use your muscles, they atrophy. If you don't use your rights, they atrophy.
Yeah.
Same thing. So if you've got nothing to hide in your trunk of your car and a police officer asks if you can look in the trunk of the car, say no.
Yeah.
No. Do not waive your rights, because that's what this country is founded upon, is not waiving your rights. So don't.
Right. No, and I think we respect law. I mean, I know I respect law enforcement, but there's no way I would talk to a police officer about an attorney present. And they also talked to his friend, and basically kind of made his friend think that he had to come along.
Right. Yeah,
with
his
them.
friend was eating at a diner, at a counter, and the 2 FBI agents came in and said, come with us, and they basically took him away.
Right.
He was under no obligation to go anywhere. He wasn't if you're not under arrest, the police cannot force you to go anywhere. If you're under arrest, if you're in custody, well, then you're in custody, and they can take you someplace.
Right.
And so many people think that they have to do what is suggested by law enforcement.
No, but
Would you mind coming with us?
Right.
Am I under arrest? Am I being detained? If not, I'm free to go, and I'm going to stay here.
Yeah.
If you're going to arrest me, arrest me. If you got a warrant, serve it. If you got probable cause, fine. But I'm not going to go with you voluntarily.
Yeah.
Because we're Americans and we don't have to do that.
Well, and they do that because they know they don't have enough.
Exactly.
So they're
Right.
hoping that they will get enough out of you
Right.
if you voluntarily go along with them.
Right.
And that's why we don't do it. I know we all think it's our duty
It's
and
not.
we want to help law enforcement, but they're not your friend when they're looking at you for having committed a crime. So if it ever happens to you where you are under suspicion, automatically you need to start thinking that they are not your friends.
They're not trying to clear you.
No, they're not trying to exonerate your name, as Richard thought in the movie. He's like,
Right.
that was another one of the horrific things that they did that was pretty unbelievable. When they came in to search his place, which they had a warrant for, but
they had a warrant for that. Yep.
and the lawyer went outside to go help the mom,
mother, yeah.
right, and then talk to the press. And so while the lawyer was away, they pull Richard inside and ask him for a voice sample, right, and made him get on the phone and say, "There's a bomb."
There's a bomb in Centennial Park. You have 30 minutes.
Right.
Which is what the actual guy said. That was recorded.
Right.
And to be fair, they didn't make him. They just asked him to.
Right.
And he did. So,
But of course, they
he
knew
shouldn't
that
have.
was not
they knew he was going to do it.
right.
He was
They
very
knew-
easily manipulated.
Yes.
Very easily
They
manipulated.
knew it wasn't kosher too, though, because he
Right.
had a lawyer, and the
Right.
lawyers. I mean, obviously, this was a little trick that they did, and it. You know, we're always finding when we watch. Like, I love watching FBI. Right, that's one of my
Right.
favorite shows, and I never have a problem when they do that kind of thing to the bad guys because you know that they're the bad guys. But
Exactly. But that's what they were doing to Richard Jewell. He
Yes.
was the bad guy.
So-
and that's the problem with that thought process.
yes,
It's convicting before, it's an assumption that is incorrect. And the assumption is that you're innocent,
Right.
not guilty.
and like he had to prove his innocence, and that's not the way
Right.
that's supposed to work.
Right.
And that's one of the other things that I took away from law school is that the system is set up that way purposely because we would rather see a guilty person go free than an innocent person go to prison. Because how much worse could life be to be sitting in
Right.
prison innocent?
Right.
That's just
Yeah.
torture.
Yeah, and we could have a whole podcast on that.
Yeah.
And I guess I wanted to mention the defamation aspect about what the Atlanta Journal-Constitution is saying about their reporter, Kathy Scruggs, that she was depicted in a defamatory way. Mm-hmm. And in this letter they sent, and because I read it and I tweeted it, so I tweeted a link to it. So you can check that out. And it's threatening a defamation lawsuit. But even in it, it's like 6 pages into it. It's like, and we realize that, you know, the defamation laws are tough in the United States, but they're easier in other countries. And you're going to be showing this all over the world. So, I mean, they acknowledge that. I mean, it's true. It's almost impossible to win a defamation lawsuit in the United States, much easier in the United Kingdom. And they'll be showing it there. So that was what the implicit.
I didn't go to the end of that article because I didn't.
But Clint Eastwood and the movie production company have said, basically, screw you guys. Yeah. But and the biggest part of it is that trading sex for information thing, which didn't need to be in there, and it's a distraction from the rest of the series.
Yeah.
And I've seen a handful of these very, very progressive websites condemn the movie for that, which I get. You know, I get that. If there's no evidence she did that, there's no need to put that in the movie. Mm-hmm. But then they say that Clint Eastwood, in making the movie, is portraying the FBI as an untrustworthy organization, and they try to tie that in, well, because that's what Trump is saying, because of everything that's going on with him, right? Well, I wish that sometimes progressives would get their attitude straight, because are cops all racists that want to incarcerate you for no reason, especially if you're a minority, and will make stuff up? Or are they law-abiding good guys that a lot of the progressive newspapers are trying to make out like the big tall guy who was in charge of the FBI for a while?
Comey?
Comey, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Comey. So when you change your attitudes about law enforcement based on your political agenda, that's called hypocrisy.
Yeah.
So pick one, right?
That's the problem with politicizing law enforcement.
Yeah. Yes.
We could do a whole episode on
Exactly.
that
All right.
as well.
Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention. Did you notice the bumper sticker the lawyer had on his picture behind him in his office?
Yes, it said, "I fear the government more than terrorism."
Yes.
Yeah.
That was I loved that.
Uh-huh.
I'm a
I
libertarian.
figured you were loving that.
I love that, but I can see how somebody who believes that government should be in charge of everything in the world, like a lot of progressives and conservatives, just in very different ways, would say, "Oh my goodness, what propaganda! He's got propaganda right there in the movie and a bumper sticker. How obvious is that?"
Which is funny because to me it just spoke to his character.
Oh yeah, it did.
As who he was, and he obviously was sort of a libertarian bent because.
At least with law enforcement. I mean, we have no idea about anything else.
Right. But as far as, protecting his client and saying, just because they work for the federal government doesn't mean that they're good guys and they're on your side.
Exactly. Oh, and one other just quick thing, I noted that factually, so they've got this big outdoor concert, like in one of them it was Kenny Rogers, and in this big park. And if anybody's been to any of these outdoor concerts at like Civic Center Park here in Denver, it was way too easy to walk around the movie.
Yeah, it was.
They're just walking through the crowd.
Right.
No, that's doesn't happen that way. People are packed in tight trying to get close.
Yeah, there weren't many people for such a big concert.
Yeah, exactly. For Kenny Rogers in '96.
Yeah, when they were pushing the crowd
back away from the bomb.
Yeah, I kept thinking there's going to be a problem because there's going to be too many people. They're going to, someone's going to get trampled or whatever.
Right.
And that didn't happen.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. That wasn't. Yeah. But
that's no big deal. And then they did the Macarena at the Olympic event in '96. And I'm sure it was a thing. I'm sure they wouldn't have done that taken that.
I was going to Google that. And I forgot.
Anachronism. They would have made that anachronism.
Right.
So it must have been in '96. I'm like, is it that old? Whoa. So Macarena, '96.
I think it was because I'm pretty sure I was in Korea when that came out, and it was in '96. So
all right, there you go.
I'll have to look that up.
And then, all right, so the actual guy who actually did this, his name was Eric Rudolph, and I remember this because he was hiding in North Carolina, in the mountains of North Carolina. It's where he was from. He knew his way around. Like the hillbillies in the mountains, right? That's the stereotype, and that was him. Mm-hmm. So he was able to avoid law enforcement for a long time, and he did blow up some other things, like some abortion clinics, I believe.
Oh, I remember that name. Yep. I vaguely, and that's the other problem with picking this guy and going after him, regardless of what the evidence said. Mm-hmm. All that time spent on trying to convict this guy. And they totally, they didn't really, maybe somebody at the FBI was looking for other suspects, but they weren't spending all their energy trying to find the actual suspect.
Yeah, and when you get an idea in your head, like this is the guy that did it, you become focused on that. Yeah. And to the exclusion of things that might indicate that he didn't do it, which they definitely did in this movie, and I think in real life. And they do that all the time. Police get an idea, then they look for evidence to support that idea.
Instead of the opposite.
Right.
Right. And the other problem, of course, was that because someone leaked it to the press, and it was all over the press, they were then invested in that. Well, we're going to look stupid if we don't, we pulled him in as a suspect, and it's all over the news. We can't just stop looking at him now.
Right.
So
that
was a lot of the problem. There are so many problems with that case.
And Eric Rudolph, the guy who actually did it, he did make 2 calls, and they depicted that in the movie. And at the first call, he said something about the militia. Yeah. And it was kind of cryptic. I didn't really quite get it. And then he hung up. He said, "Can you understand?"
You didn't obey the militia or something like that.
Right, exactly. So that does tie into showing Eric Rudolph was this extremist, this militia type extremist. Because I've seen some of the progressive criticism of the movie is like they said they whitewashed that part. They didn't mention that. Well, I mean, no, I think they did give that the attention. They recognized that, but the movie wasn't about Eric Rudolph. It was about Richard Jewell.
I kept waiting for the FBI to ask him, what militia do you belong to? And they
didn't show that.
Yeah, they didn't follow that,
and they didn't show that in the movie. Yeah.
It was a big hole. But it seems to me one of the big points too is that the federal government is so powerful.
Yes.
That this was a federal crime. It had to be handled by the FBI.
Right. That was like the little jurisdictional argument that the different levels of police had, law enforcement had, which is it's a trope almost in these movies.
I know.
So you had like the Atlanta police said, this is our thing. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation said, no, it's ours because this park is on state property. Right. And then the ATF was like, no, this is an explosion. This is us. Right. But John Hamm's like, no, we're the FBI. It's ours. You guys help us. So they had that little almost like a...
Is it just a trope, or do you think is that realistic?
No, I'm sure it's real.
That's so annoying to me. That's one of the bothersome things about law enforcement, even within different federal agencies. It's like, why are you not cooperating with each other to solve this instead of worrying about your little
your fiefdom?
Exactly. Yeah. That's one of the things that's very annoying to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the things we're going to talk about in an upcoming episode is why the federal government is so big.
Yeah.
And so pay attention. Be watching for that, because that's something we're going to cover.
Of your body.
Yeah. Next time. Why the federal government has become so big. Right. And I think that, this case is just an illustration of how powerful the FBI is.
Yep. And that reminded me, even when I was watching it, about these different organizations of law enforcement arguing about jurisdiction. It reminded me of 9/11, when a Republican president, instead of consolidating existing law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies, which would make sense to make it more efficient and streamlined, because they do that. The CIA and the FBI there's like 17 intelligence agencies in the United States government. And they do try to protect their information. They want to get credit for it. They're human beings. It's not good, but it's the truth. And we can't deny that fact. That's how people are, or can be. Some are that way. Some can be that way. You can't ignore that. And so instead of the Republican president, W., saying we're going to consolidate these things to make it more efficient and easier to find, he creates another agency. Yeah. The Department of Homeland Security. The exact opposite of what should have been done. Right. And instead of making more government and another layer of things to go through and another flow chart to deal with that has to interact with other flow charts. And that was something that I thought of in the movie.
It is a big problem.
Yes.
All right. So the lessons we're taking out of this.
Yes.
are, first of all, don't talk to the cops.
Right.
Call a lawyer. He should have called
Right.
a lawyer as soon as the FBI said,
Right.
come downtown with us. He should have
Right.
said no.
Yeah, but he believed them.
He did.
He believed that, hey, you're one of us. We appreciate what you did. Come down and do a video for us. He believed them.
Yeah.
So don't believe him.
But then when he was getting into his vehicle, someone from the press said, you're a
Right.
suspect. At that point, see, when he was driving,
Yeah.
I thought if that were me, I would have been like, oh, no.
Right.
U-turn.
Yeah.
You know?
But he was so committed to his belief in helping and being a good guy,
Right.
and that the FBI was all good guys,
Right.
that he just said, no, I'm not.
Well, and if
he
you're
believed it.
innocent,
He
I think
believed
so
it.
many times we think if we're innocent, of course,
Yeah.
why would we not cooperate?
Right. Yeah, and here's a good saying too. You can remember this. Put this on a bumper sticker. No one needs a lawyer. No, wait a minute. No one needs a lawyer more. Here we go. Take two. No one needs a lawyer more than a guilty man than an innocent one. So,
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
no matter what, don't. Even if you're guilty, especially, you know,
Right.
definitely
And,
need a
well, if
lawyer.
you're innocent, especially.
But if you're an innocent person, don't.
Right.
Don't help. They're not there to help you. The police are not there to prove you innocent. That's not what they're after.
Right. Yeah. Another way to visualize it, I think it helps me anyway, is that you're innocent, right? You're like here. You're innocent, and nothing you say can make you more innocent.
Right.
Nothing you say, but whatever you say can be used against you. And even if it's completely innocent, it can be twisted around on you. So you can't be more innocent than you are when you start. Don't help them.
Right.
Don't help them. If they find evidence that he had bomb making material in his mom's Tupperware, okay, then that's evidence, and he might have done it.
Right.
But don't help them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shut up. Because it's American to shut up.
That's right.
If you want to talk about a football game or the weather, okay, that's fine.
Right.
I'm not saying don't do that. Be polite.
Yes.
Always be polite.
No. Oh yeah. You don't want to hassle. That's for
Exactly.
sure. No.
Yes.
Polite, but talk about the weather. Talk about
Right.
sports.
How about those Broncos?
Yeah.
All right. Just one other thing. I thought the scene with the president, I guess, of the university where Richard Jewell worked and got fired for harassing students. And then later on, he's the one that actually gave the FBI some of the first reason to go after Richard Jewell, because he was like, oh, I saw it was Richard Jewell, and he was kind of looking for attention when he was here. And so he called. I don't know if that actually happened, but in the movie, the president of that small university was the one that called the FBI about him being involved in it. And he reminded me of Dean Wormer from the Animal House movies. His office looked like that, kind of. So I thought of that. Then there was a scene in the newspaper office where they've already established that nobody likes Kathy Scruggs. I mean, she got a few people she works with, but like the newsroom doesn't like her.
Yeah.
They established that.
Right.
And then after this news becomes first page of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and they break the story that he's a suspect, she walks in and the newsroom claps for her.
Right.
That was cringe.
Yes, it was.
That was cringe.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
So I thought,
That would not have
okay.
happened.
My problem with it was, of course, the way she got the story.
Right.
I'm
Well,
like,
yeah.
do they even know what they're clapping, that she just prostituted herself for this story?
But I don't think that actually happened. Just to say that. But in the movie, it did. Yeah.
Right. No,
But-
she was not a likable
No.
character at all. And there's a reason that they didn't like her. To put it politely, she was a wench.
And his lawyer had him. He's hitting some bullet points here. His lawyer had him do a lie detector privately in his office.
Right.
So it wasn't going to be used. It couldn't be used by the FBI. And that's one thing Richard Jewell says, why didn't we just let the FBI do it? And his lawyer's like, you trust
know.
them with the results, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it just shows Richard Jewell's commitment.
Yeah, why do you think they did that? Because they never used it?
Yeah, they didn't use it. I don't know why, and I would never have anybody do a lie detector for any reason whatsoever. It's voodoo. It's not legitimate.
Right.
So
they probably just did it for the movie, just to show.
Yeah, I mean,
so that if the audience had any question
Right.
at all, this was the proof.
and maybe it helped the lawyer believe it,
Right.
and Nadia, the helper, the lawyer helper,
Yeah.
who we find out later they got married.
Right.
After the movie happened.
Yeah.
In the little scroll, not the scroll, but the little title cards at the end, it tells
Right.
you that. And Richard Jewell died at 44, apparently.
Yeah.
In 2007 from a heart condition, because he was not a healthy guy. He was too big.
There were a few times during the movie I thought he was going to have a heart
They
attack.
showed that. They did show that.
during
He was
the
like,
movie.
he kind of like,
Yeah.
They definitely showed that he had a heart issue. And I saw that one of these progressive newspaper online articles criticizing the movie for what they perceived as Clint Eastwood's being a mouthpiece for Donald Trump, and they mentioned that, and there were Confederate flags in the law enforcement officers. Do you know what those were?
Yeah, well, no, but it was 96, first of
Right.
all, but what were they for?
It was a Georgia state flag.
Well, yeah, that's what I figured.
Right.
I thought, what I was thinking.
Because it's not completely, it's part of the flag.
Right. What
It's
I was
part of
thinking at the
Georgia
time
state
was
flag.
that I'm sure that's not there anymore.
Right.
But then I was also thinking, but this was back in 96 before
Correct,
it
it was
was
96.
so terrible to have
Right.
the Confederate
Yeah.
flag anymore.
But it wasn't the Confederate flag. It was
It
the
was the
Georgia,
Georgia
flag,
flag.
which has it in there, which is bad enough. But
right,
anyway, that
right.
was just something
Okay.
that, some people see and lose their sense of factual history.
Right.
All right. Well, I think that is most of what I made notes about and thought about. Are we
right.
leaving anything out?
Yeah, it was a good movie, other than the foul language, like I said. I just had to.
It's funny. I grew up Southern Baptist, and I didn't even notice it.
Well, everyone knows pretty much that I'm LDS, and I usually do not see rated R movies. I've made a few exceptions over the years. I've vetted them ahead of time.
Yeah.
I vetted this one a little bit, but yeah, I knew I was probably in for it, so I had to just sit there and ignore it because the story was really good.
Yeah.
But it detracts for those of people out there like me who don't usually see R movies. It's hard. You feel like
hear
you're
all
under
that
attack.
language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw that movie, The Sniper, I think it was called.
Yeah, that was one.
And I felt like I was assulted because
by the language.
the F-bomb was used
Yeah.
I don't know how many times. Again, great story. They would
Right.
just leave out the language. But
Yes.
anyway, all right. So you're going to be writing an article on this?
And I will have a link to that, and I'll tweet it out, and I'll give it to you, obviously, so you can do with it what you will.
All
about
right.
some of my
So
thoughts
when
on
I
that.
will be posting this a week from Monday, so by the time everyone sees this, the article should be written and published by
Yes.
then. All right. And I will link to it in my show notes. And so if you go to AnnetteTalks.com, it'll be there. It'll be on YouTube. And it should be on the show notes for all the other podcast outlets, whatever you call those things.
Awesome.
So, and we are going to get together again soon, and we're going to podcast about why the federal government is so big,
Right.
how that happened.
Yes.
And some other good.
Yeah, and so
stuff.
remember me on Twitter, The Law DKW.
Right. And your podcast is on.
It's Speakeasy Ideas. It's on all of the podcast providers, all the
Right, iTunes and all that good
right,
stuff.
right.
Okay.
And it's under Speakeasy Ideas. That is the name of the podcast channel, I guess, because
Right.
it's me and it's one other guy who started it all. Who talks more about historical events and things like the Federalist Papers, where I'm focused on current, and historical Supreme Court cases and legal issues of the day.
Right.
Yep.
Cool.
So check that out.
All right. I'll link
Always
to
a
that.
pleasure.
I'll link to that on the website as well. So thank
Awesome.
you for joining me.
Always
for
a
the good
pleasure.
movie.
Love it. Yes.
And you can find this podcast on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube.
All of them.
Yeah, and go to YouTube and subscribe, please, and subscribe on my website. And then, every episode that comes up will just come right into your
And hit the
email
bell. That's
inbox.
what I hear them say. You hit the bell on YouTube, because then you'll get notifications when there's a new post.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So you can listen or go to YouTube and watch us there, and catch up on all the episodes you have not listened to or watched yet. So thank you for watching and listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness.